The village did not need walls to watch its people. It watched with eyes, with ears, with whispers that moved faster than the wind. Every footstep Mamuna took was counted, every smile noticed, every mistake remembered. In that village, news traveled from the well to the market before the sun climbed high. Reputation was a fragile pot. Once cracked, it never held water the same way again. Elders said the village was like a drum. Strike it once, and the sound carried everywhere. Mamuna grew from that red soil, her feet always dusted with earth, her hands rough from work. She rose before the rooster, fetched water while the morning mist still clung to the fields, and returned home with aching arms and quiet pride. Poverty shaped her days, but it did not bend her spine. She learned early that strength did not shout, it endured. When others complained, Mamuna worked. When others slept, she planned. The soil fed her body, but struggle fed her spirit. At night, when the fires were lit and shadows danced on mud walls, the elders gathered the young ones close. Flames crackled as stories flowed, tales of greedy men who fell, patient women who rose, and villages destroyed by pride. An old man would clear his throat and say, "A child who ignores wisdom will learn from pain." Mamuna listened closely, her eyes reflecting the fire. She remembered every word, even when she pretended not to. Her mother sat nearby, always silent, always strong. Her back was bent not by age, but by sacrifice. She stitched torn clothes, stretched small meals, and carried worry without complaint. When Mamuna once asked why life was so hard, her mother replied softly, "The river that flows slowly still reaches the sea." She believed in patience, not shortcuts. Dignity mattered more than comfort, and Mamuna learned this lesson through her mother's tired hands. Her father lived only in stories now. Some said he died too young, others said fate simply took him. What remained was his name, spoken with respect. He was poor, the elders said, but his word was clean. Mamuna carried that shadow with her. When temptation came, she remembered a man who owned nothing but honor. Mamuna's beauty did not hide in silence. Her eyes were sharp, her mind quicker still. She learned faster than others, dreamed bigger than most. Yet each day felt smaller. The village praised obedience, not ambition. As Mamuna watched the horizon glow at sunset, her heart beat louder than the drums. Something inside her whispered, "There is more than this." And that whisper refused to sleep. In the village, there were things everyone praised and things everyone feared, though few spoke of them openly. Obedience was praised like rain after drought. A quiet girl was called well-raised. A girl who lowered her eyes was called respectful. Marriage was spoken of as the highest crown a woman could wear, and silence was taught as her strongest shield. When young women gathered at the stream, old women watched from a distance, reminding them with sharp looks that too much laughter could invite trouble. "A girl who talks too much," one elder often said, "invites the wind to scatter her life." Mamuna listened, nodded, and obeyed. But inside her chest, something restless stirred. While her body moved as the village expected, her heart wandered far beyond the red soil paths. She dreamed of being seen, not just counted. She imagined a life where her name carried weight, where her hands touched beauty, not just labor. At night, as others slept peacefully, Mamuna stared at the ceiling and whispered to herself, "Is this all my life will be?" The question returned again and again, refusing to stay quiet. Sometimes, temptation came in small, glowing rectangles. Borrowed phones passed from hand to hand like forbidden fruit. Mamuna would hold one carefully, her fingers trembling as images filled her eyes. Bright clothes, tall buildings, soft beds, smiling women with shining skin. Lagos lived inside that screen, loud and proud. Each picture planted a seed of dissatisfaction in her heart. She felt both hunger and shame, knowing those images were not meant for girls like her. Then the returnees came back during festive seasons. They arrived in polished shoes and tight dresses, speaking loudly, laughing freely. Dust avoided them as if it knew they no longer belonged to it. Women gathered around them, eyes wide with admiration. "Lagos changed me," one would say, adjusting her hair. Mamuna watched quietly, envy burning slow and hot. She did not see the nights of struggle behind their smiles, only the victory they wore on their bodies. In that village, poverty was not named, but it was felt. It hung in the air like smoke. A poor girl was seen as careless, unlucky, or lazy. For women, the judgment was heavier. When Mamuna passed by, whispers followed. "She is smart, but what will that change?" someone muttered. Another laughed softly. "If she was serious, she would already be married." The laughter never sounded cruel, yet it cut deeper than insults. Comparisons were dressed as jokes. "Look at her," a girl once said, smiling sweetly, "still here, while others escaped." Mamuna forced a laugh, but inside, something hardened. That night, as she washed her feet, she stared at the red water swirling away and thought, "I will not always be the one they pity." And with that thought, the distance between her and the village quietly began to grow. The red dirt road had carried Mamuna since childhood. Every morning, her feet followed it to the stream. Every evening, it led her back home. No matter how fast she walked, it always returned her to the same place. Elders said the road was patient, but Mamuna felt it was tired. One afternoon, she stood still on it, dust clinging to her ankles, and whispered, "Is this all I will ever walk?" The road gave no answer. It only stretched forward, then curved back, as if reminding her that some paths repeat themselves forever. At night, when the village slept, Mamuna climbed the small hill beyond the huts. From there, she could see a faint glow far away, like stars resting on the earth. Lagos. The city lights blinked softly, calling and warning at the same time. An old woman once said, "Light can guide you home, but it can also blind you." Mamuna felt hope rise in her chest, mixed with fear. Still, the glow felt alive, unlike the silence behind her. She did not announce her choice. There were no loud words, no arguments. At dawn, she packed a small bag and stood before her mother. Her mother looked at her for a long time, then said quietly, "The road you choose will test you." Mamuna nodded. She knelt, touched the ground, and rose again. When she stepped onto the road, her heart beat like a drum, steady and final. She did not look back. The city did not welcome her. It roared. Horns screamed, feet rushed past her, voices collided like waves. Lagos smelled of sweat, fuel, and urgency. Mamuna clutched her bag as people brushed her aside. No one noticed her confusion. No one waited. The city moved as if it had no time for dreams. Her first room was barely a room at all. Four walls, cracked and tired, with a mat on the floor. The landlord looked at her once and said, "Pay or go." That night, Mamuna sat alone, hunger tightening her stomach. She pressed her back against the wall and laughed softly, then stopped. Independence tasted bitter. The nights were the hardest. Hunger kept her awake, and tears came without sound. She remembered the elders' words, her mother's patience, the red road she left behind. "So this is the price," she whispered. Outside, Lagos continued to roar. Inside, Mamuna closed her eyes and held on to one truth. Dreams were not free, but she had already paid the first cost. In Lagos, help rarely came without a price. On her third week in the city, a man noticed Mamuna sitting outside a shop, her eyes dull with hunger. He smiled too quickly and said, "Sister, you look lost. I can help you." His voice sounded kind, but his eyes counted her like money. When she followed him, his words changed. "Nothing is free here," he whispered. Mamuna pulled away, her heart pounding. She remembered her mother's warning, "A gift that asks for silence steals more than it gives." From that day, she learned to thank help from afar. It was women who spoke to her without hunger in their eyes. They gathered her like a wounded bird and taught her the city's true language. One said, "In this place, crying is weakness." Another added, "Your beauty is a door, learn when to open it and when to lock it." Mamuna listened, torn between fear and gratitude. These women had survived storms she could not yet see. Still, their lessons clashed with the village values stitched into her bones. Lagos taught nothing gently. It taught through hunger, through fear, through watching others fall. Mamuna learned that money spoke louder than truth, that beauty could protect or destroy, and that silence was sometimes safer than honesty. She learned when to smile and when to disappear. Each lesson carved a piece of her innocence away, leaving strength behind, but also scars. Slowly, her appearance changed. The faded village cloth gave way to fitted dresses. Her bare face learned color. When she looked into the mirror, She barely recognized the girl staring back. The city had polished her, sharpened her edges. People began to notice. Heads turned. Doors opened. Mamuna felt powerful, as if she had stepped into a new skin. Soon, her name began to travel without her. People spoke of her at parties she had not yet attended. "That girl," someone said. "She's hot." Another whispered, "Careful, she's dangerous." Admiration followed her like perfume, thick and sweet. Envy followed too, quiet and sharp. Mamuna smiled through it all, unaware of how fast praise could turn to poison. The applause was loud. It lifted her, fed her pride, made her feel chosen. But when the music stopped and the lights dimmed, the silence felt heavier than hunger ever had. Alone in her room, surrounded by borrowed beauty, Mamuna touched her chest and felt an emptiness growing. "Is this success?" she asked herself softly. Outside, Lagos laughed and danced. Inside, Mamuna sat still, sensing that the city had given her a crown, but taken something she did not yet know how to name. In the quiet moments, when the city finally slowed its breath, the village returned to Mamuna. It came in the sound of water dripping from a tap, in the smell of warm food from a neighbor's room, in the stillness before sleep. She would lie on her bed and hear her mother's voice as clearly as if she were standing beside her. "Do not forget who you are," the voice would say. Mamuna turned her face to the wall, guilt pressing on her chest. She had not called home in weeks. The red soil, the dusty road, the patient woman who raised her, they all waited inside her silence. To quiet that voice, Mamuna told herself a story. "This is survival," she repeated whenever doubt rose. "I am doing what I must." Each new dress, each expensive night, each favor accepted came with the same excuse. But deep down, she knew the truth was bending. What began as hunger had slowly learned the taste of desire. She wanted more, not just food or shelter, but praise, comfort, power. The line between need and greed faded like chalk in the rain, and Mamuna pretended not to notice. Around her, smiles grew wide and empty. Friends praised her beauty, her rise, her luck. "You inspire us," they said, raising glasses in her name. But Mamuna noticed how their eyes measured her, what she wore, who she knew, what she could offer. When trouble came, those smiles disappeared first. One night, after she paid for everything and sat alone, she whispered, "So this is friendship." The city echoed back with laughter that did not care. Love came dressed as rescue. A man with soft words and heavy promises took her hand and said, "I will protect you." At first, Mamuna felt safe. Then the rules appeared. "Don't wear that. Don't talk to him. Remember who takes care of you." The affection tightened like a rope. When she resisted, his voice hardened. "I made you," he said once. Mamuna pulled her hand away, shaking. She remembered the elder's warning, chains often shine before they cut. Lagos watched it all without blinking. The city lifted Mamuna high when she was bold and beautiful. Doors opened. Music followed her. But the same city pushed others aside without mercy. She saw girls disappear overnight, stories swallowed by the streets. Lagos was not cruel, the elders would have said. It was fair in its own harsh way. It rewarded strength and punished weakness, without apology. The nights grew louder. Music thundered. Gold flashed. Names were shouted. Mamuna moved through it all like a queen wearing borrowed power. People clapped when she entered, and she smiled as if she believed it. Yet when the music ended and the room emptied, she sat alone, removing jewelry piece by piece. Each one felt heavier than the last. Staring at her reflection, Mamuna asked softly, "When did I become this tired?" Outside, Lagos kept dancing. Inside, the village waited, patient and unforgotten. Mamuna had become a force in Lagos. People noticed her before she entered a room, cameras followed her every step, and whispers of admiration trailed her like smoke. She was powerful, bold, untouchable in the eyes of the crowd. Yet, in the quiet, that strength felt hollow. Nights stretched long and cold, and she discovered that influence and attention could not warm the heart. She laughed at parties, smiled for the cameras, but when the music died down, she sat alone, staring at the ceiling, feeling a loneliness that no applause could chase away. Her phone buzzed with calls from home, each one a reminder of the dusty road she had left behind. She saw her mother's name flash on the screen and felt the tug of obligation, of love, of roots she had tried to cut. Yet she let the calls go unanswered. I cannot go back now, she told herself. This is my life. But each unanswered call carved a deeper silence in her soul, a quiet hollow where warmth and belonging once lived. In those moments of solitude, shame began to seep in. The pride that had once lifted her above the whispers of the village now felt fragile and empty. The clothes, the jewelry, the parties, all of it masked the fear that she had traded something she could not buy, self-respect. She caught herself adjusting her dress in mirrors, not to look beautiful for herself, but to hide the cracks in her heart. Who am I truly becoming? She whispered, voice trembling. Old words returned unbidden. The elders' voices spoke in her dreams, echoing warnings that once seemed distant. A girl who forgets the soil that bore her will find her feet in sand that sinks. Greed disguised as survival eats the soul. Each lesson stirred like wind through dry grass, restless and unyielding. Mamuna woke drenched in sweat, haunted by the sense that the city's bright lights were casting long shadows she could not outrun. Still, she climbed higher. Social media, invitations, recognition, they lifted her above everyone, as if she stood on the tallest step of the city itself. Cameras flashed, followers multiplied, and voices spoke her name in awe. But beneath the glittering shoes, the polished floors, the borrowed crowns, the cracks were growing. She felt them beneath her weight, small tremors that hinted at fragility. Every compliment, every photograph, every empty applause carried the quiet warning, the higher you rise, the harder the fall. And then, one night, Lagos turned its back. A scandal, small at first, then magnified by whispers and flashing phones, broke through the image she had built. Friends vanished, promises melted into thin air, and the city's glow seemed colder than ever. Mamuna stood in the middle of a room full of strangers, dressed in gold, surrounded by luxury, and yet she felt invisible, stripped, exposed. The power she had fought so hard to grasp had slipped through her fingers in an instant, leaving only the echo of a warning she had ignored. The city had taught her a lesson. It gives, but it devours. The glow of Mamuna's phone had once brought her joy, but now it carried whispers sharper than knives. Messages spread like fire in dry grass. A single picture, a single rumor, traveled faster than she could follow. Admiration twisted into judgment, and every notification became a drumbeat of accusation. She pressed the device to her chest, trembling. "Why does everyone know so quickly?" she whispered, voice cracking. The city she had trusted as her stage now felt like a courtroom where eyes watched, fingers pointed, and mercy hid behind glowing screens. Her name, once spoken with awe, now fell like a curse. Mamuna. "That one," people said, shaking heads. Murmurs of scandal replaced cheers. The girls who had once copied her style laughed behind closed doors. She passed familiar streets, and strangers' faces twisted into warning signs. Every greeting, every glance, felt sharp, cutting deeper than any insult from the village. Mamuna felt her carefully built identity crumble, as if the city itself had decided to reclaim her. Friends who had toasted her success vanished with the sunrise. Where once glasses clinked and music echoed her name, silence now filled the spaces. Calls went unanswered, messages ignored. Smiles that had shone brightly for her faded like dying embers. She remembered the words her mother had said long ago, "Some people celebrate your rise only because they see shadows in your fall." Mamuna now understood the truth in them. Those who had once offered protection, powerful and influential, lifted their shields and walked away. Promises of support melted into distance. One voice, once commanding in her favor, now whispered, "I cannot be seen here." Another said simply, "Your fight is yours alone." Mamuna stood in her apartment, walls lined with luxury, and realized that safety could be as fleeting as a candle in the wind. The rooms were quiet. The laughter had gone. Music did not echo through hallways. Mamuna wandered from one empty space to another, surrounded by silk and gold that could not fill the silence. Nights stretched long and cold. She touched her reflection in the mirror and saw someone both familiar and strange. The city had given her everything, and yet, in the echo of absence, it gave nothing at all. High towers, once symbols of her triumph, now seemed to sway with hidden cracks. Her foundation, built on admiration, borrowed power, and fragile alliances, trembled beneath her weight. Every step felt uncertain, as if the ground could vanish. Mamuna gripped the railing of her balcony, looking down at the streets that had once cheered her. She realized that the higher she had risen, the more exposed she had become. The city, which had given her glory, now demanded its reckoning, leaving her to confront the truth. Even the tallest towers cannot hold what is hollow within. The spotlight that had followed Mamuna everywhere finally dimmed. Cameras no longer waited for her entrance. Phones that had sung her name now lay silent in the palms of strangers. For the first time, she stood in a room without applause, without admiration, without the hum of attention that had once made her feel untouchable. She pressed her hands against her face and whispered to the emptiness, "Who am I if no one sees me?" The city's glow outside her window felt distant, indifferent, as if Lagos itself had turned its face away. Shame burned hotter than any hunger she had known in the village. Each memory of her choices, every compromise, every lie she had told herself, rose like smoke to choke her. She sank to the floor, tears burning her cheeks. "I thought I was strong," she said through trembling lips, "but I am nothing." The weight of humiliation pressed against her chest harder than any crowded city street. For the first time, she could not hide from herself. Her body, once tireless in pursuit of fame and escape, refused to keep running. The nights of parties, the endless hours of performing a self she barely recognized, now demanded payment. A fever, sharp and sudden, left her shivering in the cold apartment. Hunger and exhaustion wrapped around her ribs like iron chains. Mamuna closed her eyes and felt her city armor crack. She could not move, could not dance, could not pretend. The city that had given and devoured had finally stopped her in her tracks. Through the pain, her mother's voice rose in her mind, soft yet unyielding. "Remember dignity, my child. Remember who you are." Mamuna clutched the memory like a lifeline. The words were not just memories, they were warnings, shields, and truths she had buried beneath glitter and ambition. They called her back to a path she had almost forgotten. "Mother, forgive me," she whispered into the empty room, feeling the weight of years of disconnection. Village lessons, once smothered by makeup, music, and the noise of praise, began to resurface. Humility, patience, and honor whispered in her ears. She recalled the dusty roads, the evening fires, the elders' stories about choices and consequences. Each memory weighed on her with clarity. "Power without roots is a brittle thing," one voice said. "Wealth without self is emptiness," another reminded. Mamuna felt these truths pierce the illusion she had lived by, awakening a part of her that still remembered home. Alone among millions, Mamuna became invisible for the first time. The streets she had once commanded with beauty and attention now passed her like shadows. Faces that had smiled in her presence turned, uninterested. She walked through the city, carrying only herself, and realized the cost of trading belonging for attention. Luxury had left her hollow. Applause had left her silent. And in that invisibility, Mamuna finally understood that the only recognition that mattered was the one she could give herself. Mamuna stared into the mirror, and for the first time, she did not recognize the face looking back. The eyes that had once sparkled with confidence now carried exhaustion, shame, and longing. The lips that had smiled for cameras, that had whispered promises to strangers, now trembled as if asking themselves a question too heavy to answer. "Who am I beneath all this?" She touched the glass and felt the mask she had worn for years, a mask that had dazzled the world but buried her soul. Her reflection seemed to speak. "Are you the daughter of the red soil, or this glitter that others praise?" Memories of dusty roads, evening fires, and her mother's gentle hands clashed with the echoes of parties, selfies, and borrowed power. She felt pulled in two directions. One path familiar, grounding, full of humility and roots, the other bright, enticing, and yet hollow, lined with applause that could not warm the heart. The weight of her choices pressed down on her like the afternoon sun on the village fields. Every compromise, every lie told in pursuit of admiration, now settled over her shoulders like heavy chains. She remembered faces of those she had trusted, now vanished. Men who had offered affection with demands, friends who had counted her value and left her empty. Each memory carved clarity and pain into her heart. She whispered to the empty room, "I see now. I understand the cost." Fate seemed to wait silently, standing at the crossroads of her life. It offered no guidance, no escape. The city that had dazzled her now held its breath, letting her alone with the truth. The noise of Lagos faded, leaving only the pounding of her own heart. She realized destiny does not force choices, it only gives moments to decide. And this moment, heavy and still, demanded honesty. Two paths lay before her. One sparkled with false promises, fame, attention, and the illusion of power. The other was steep, unglamorous, demanding courage and patience, yet it promised something enduring, truth, self-respect, and a return to the roots she had almost forgotten. Her fingers clenched, her chest tightened. She closed her eyes and felt the pulse of the red soil, the heartbeat of her mother's words, the strength of a legacy built on honor. The morning came after the storm, quiet and gentle. Sunlight seeped through the window, casting soft gold across the floor. For the first time in months, Mamuna felt stillness inside her. The city outside moved with its usual hurry, but inside, she breathed. The chaos of attention, betrayal, and illusion had passed, leaving her alone with herself. And in that calm, she felt the stirrings of healing, the beginning of a return to who she was meant to be. Mamuna stepped off the crowded streets of Lagos, leaving behind the glittering lights and the hollow praise. She carried no gold, no fancy clothes, no tokens of her fleeting triumphs, only the weightless clarity of truth. All that shone was not mine to keep, she whispered to herself, the city's roar fading behind her. She had learned that wealth without roots is like sand slipping through fingers, bright for a moment, gone the next. Her spirit, however, felt lighter than it had in years. She counted what the city had given, attention, fleeting power, the thrill of being desired. And then she counted what it had stolen, peace, trust, self-respect, and the gentle pride of being the girl from the red soil. The city gave me mirrors, she said softly, but it broke my reflection. The truth was painful, but it was hers to hold. No one could take it away. Each step away from the concrete towers felt like a prayer returning to the earth. The roads that once seemed small, dusty, and limiting now welcomed her with open arms. With every footfall, she felt humility wrap around her, acceptance guiding her toward the ground that had shaped her. She walked as if her mother's hands were on her shoulders, steadying her through the wind of regret and longing. When she reached the familiar gate of her village, her mother was waiting, silent but present. The moment her arms wrapped around Mamuna, all judgment melted into the warmth of love. "Child, you are home," her mother murmured, pressing her forehead to Mamuna's. Tears ran freely, a mixture of sorrow, relief, and forgiveness. "I see now," Mamuna whispered. "I understand what I lost, and what I almost forgot." The village, with its traditions that had waited quietly, patiently, for her return, seemed to breathe with her. The fires, the evening drums, the stories of ancestors, they all welcomed her back. Rituals, once distant and abstract, now resonated within her. She felt the pulse of generations guiding her, offering lessons that no city lights could teach. Standing in the middle of the courtyard, Mamuna faced herself for the first time without excuses. She did not blame anyone, she did not hide behind shame or pride. "I chose," she said aloud, voice steady in the evening air. "I am responsible for my journey, my mistakes, my return." And in that moment, beneath the stars and the patient gaze of her ancestors, Mamuna knew that she was whole again, not through wealth nor applause, but through truth, humility, and the enduring strength of her roots. Mamuna gathered the village girls under the wide baobab tree, its branches stretching like the arms of ancestors who had watched over the land for centuries. She spoke with a voice steady and soft, sharing the lessons that Lagos had carved into her heart. "Do not chase the glitter if it blinds you to who you are," she said, her eyes scanning the curious faces. "Power is not the applause you hear, but the respect you give yourself." The girls nodded, some wide-eyed, some thoughtful, as if they could feel the weight of her journey. She chose honesty now over the comfort of illusion. There were no false smiles, no pretenses of luxury or success. Each word she spoke came from the truth she had earned, from the nights of hunger and the hollow parties, from the friends who vanished when she needed them most. "It is easier to lie," she admitted, "but easier is never the way that honors your heart." Walking the dusty village roads, she felt the earth beneath her feet in a way she never had before. The same red soil that had once trapped her now grounded her. Each step was a rhythm of strength, a connection to the life she had almost forgotten in the city. What was hardship before was now her anchor, a reminder that true resilience comes from enduring, not escaping. She listened to the elders' words again, not as warnings to resist, but as teachings that had finally become clear. Pride without patience is like a tree without roots, her mother had said. Now, every word settled in her mind like rain in dry soil. Tradition was not a chain, it was a guide, a map for navigating both the world and oneself. Mamuna finally understood that wealth without self was the greatest poverty. The jewels and the praise, the silks and the parties, they were empty when her spirit was hollow. All the money in Lagos, she whispered, cannot fill a heart that forgets its own worth. She balanced the lessons of modern dreams with the old truths, recognizing that progress need not erase heritage. The stories of the ancestors and the lessons of the elders bent with time, but they did not break, and she would carry them forward with respect and clarity. Now, she stood taller than the girl who had left for the city, taller than the illusions that had once seemed like wings. Her shoulders held the calm strength of one who had fallen and risen, who had seen both vanity and truth, and chosen the latter. She was no slay queen, no fleeting figure in the city lights. She was Mamuna, a woman who knew her worth, a keeper of her dignity, a guardian of her own soul. And in that knowledge, she found a power that no applause could ever grant, a strength rooted in herself, eternal as the red soil beneath her feet.